As you can see, I'm reading from Mark 6:31 through 44 for our scripture today. Many people were coming and going, so there was no time to eat. He said to the disciples, "Come by yourselves to a secluded place and rest for a while." They departed in a boat by themselves for a deserted place. Many people saw them leaving and recognized them, so they ran ahead from all the cities and arrived before them. When Jesus arrived and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. Then he began to teach them many things. Late in the day, his disciples came to him and said, "This is an isolated place, and it's already late in the day. Send them away so that they can go to the surrounding countryside and villages and buy something to eat for themselves." He replied, "You give them something to eat." But they said to him, "Should we go off and buy bread worth almost 8 months' pay and give it to them to eat?" He said to them, "How much bread do you have? Take a look." After checking, they said, 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. He directed the disciples to seat all the people in groups as though they were having a banquet on the green grass. They sat down in groups of hundreds and fifties. He took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, looked up to heaven and blessed them, broke the loaves into pieces, and gave them to his disciples to set before the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them all. Everyone ate until they were full. They filled 12 baskets with the leftover pieces of bread and fish. About 5,000 had eaten. This is the story of our faith. Now let's write our faith stories too.
It may seem strange to welcome a guest on Halloween Sunday, but I assure you there is no trick, and this morning the treat is actually all ours. And in a normal year, or a more normal year, we'd be talking about kids going about collecting sweets and candies, but this morning we have the opportunity to think about those who are looking for something more basic and more important. We think of those families that live at or below the poverty line, who are looking for any food some days, good, bad, or otherwise, and how difficult that can be for them to come by. And because we know that need is real and exists in our neighborhoods, it's a pleasure for me to be able to take this moment to share our pulpit, to offer a word from one of our neighbors and our ministry partners who is involved in the work of giving our neighbors something to eat. Behind me, Myra Battin is the president of the board of the Bremerton Backpack Brigade. That's still true, right? Yeah. And she's also a member of St. Paul's Episcopal Church here in Bremerton. She and I have known each other for quite some time, first met with the Kitsap Interfaith Network. Myra has had a heart for feeding hungry kids and making her community a better place for as long as I've known her, and that hasn't been very long. I know you've been doing it even longer. So it is my pleasure this morning to introduce and invite to share with us our guest and my friend, Myra Battin. And I know she wouldn't necessarily want it, but I think she could accept on behalf of the brigade our welcome and our thanks for being here this morning. So, thank you.
Thank you, dear. Thank you for inviting me here today and for letting me share more than you ever wanted to know about the brigade. I don't know how many of you sing, but I have a feeling when I'm talking to you about sharing and caring and taking care of people who in need, I'm preaching to the choir here. Hunger is real. Hunger is all around us like an invisible plague. 1 in 6 children in the U.S. faces food insecurity, lives with food insecurity. The number of homeless families in Washington State just Washington State, increased 20% from 2019 to 2020. The pandemic has most severely impacted families who were already facing hunger, or those living one paycheck away from facing hunger. Kitsap County, Bremerton, is not unique in fighting a battle against childhood hunger. Hunger is that other pandemic that our nation faces. Here at home, you're likely to know a neighbor or not know a neighbor, to know that there is a neighbor, a friend and family member of children that your children go to school with, even a co-worker. They may all be struggling every day with incredibly hard decisions like, do I pay our rent, put gas in the car, or buy food? Scripture has a lot to say about our responsibility in caring for our neighbors and feeding the hungry. I looked up some verses. I wanted, something to write to you all about, read to you. And there are dozens, literally dozens. And so I won't read them all to you, which was my original intent. But I want to talk about two of my favorites. I want to start with Peter's first meeting with Christ after the resurrection. In my personal interpretation of Scripture, I believe Peter was filled with angst. Oh gosh, there he is. I'm going to see him. He's going to talk to me. He knows what I did. Jesus, on the other hand, is filled with patience. He waits till after breakfast to talk to Peter. And Jesus is firmly anchored in teacher mode when he does it. He asks Peter 3 questions. You all know the questions. Peter, do you love me? And then again he asks Peter, do you love me? And a third time he asks Peter, do you love me? Peter answers every question sincerely and eagerly by saying, yes, Lord, I love you. I'm sure the I'm sorry is implied. With his own exquisite timing, Jesus tells Peter, feed my sheep. This story allows us a really wide open, clear window into seeing just how important it is to Christ that his sheep, his followers, continue to be cared for by this fallible disciple Peter. Feed my sheep. Despite all they've been through and all Peter will face, feed my sheep is what Jesus has to tell him. I can't help but believe that teachable moment recorded in holy writings is intended for us too, his other fallible disciples. Feed my sheep. Clint and I talked the other day about the other best known story, the one we heard earlier. This story is a scripture lesson, a teachable moment, so important it's recorded in all 4 Gospels. Jesus and the miracle of the loaves and fishes. I picture that beautiful, probably sunny day in a hillside and lots of people milling about and just basking in the glow of Jesus' teachings. And it says, one of the readings tells us that Philip is the one who comes to Jesus and says, how on earth are we going to feed all those people? He's looking for direction from his teacher, his friend. He didn't expect Jesus to just say, well, what do we have? Before Philip can even answer, Andrew brings forward a little boy who has a lunch. He brought a simple lunch to the gathering. And 5 loaves and 2 fishes, we've all heard that. I have an aside about that lunch. I can imagine, I can guess that his mama packed that little boy his lunch for the day. He was going to be gone all day, and she didn't want him to be hungry all day. She could never have ever imagined that that simple lunch she packed her son would become part of one of Jesus' greatest miracles. Jesus blessed that little boy's meager meal and asked his disciples to begin sharing it with the crowd. And at the end of the day, at the end of the story, of course we know that not only was everybody fed, but there were baskets and baskets and baskets of food left over. Another teachable moment. I wonder, does it actually matter how that miracle manifested itself? Or could the takeaway be as a takeaway that's so critical that the writers of Scripture felt they needed to share it in all the gospel writings? Could it be as simple as, in faith, share with those in need? That simple. In faith, share with those in need. Food is important. Food makes a difference. Food is an integral part of our culture. Food is part of most every gathering. Food can be a reward or even a special event all by itself. Food fuels our bodies and our minds. And food often means, I love you. With all that being true about food, it's probably hard to wrap our minds around understanding what it's like to be a hungry child. Bounty everywhere, and I'm hungry. I'm going to go to sleep tonight if I'm a hungry child, with my tummy empty and not knowing if there's food for me tomorrow somewhere. That's the reality of far too many children in our community, right here in our community. The good news is we have the ability to change that. Well-fed and well-nourished children arrive at school on Monday mornings ready to learn. Those same well-fed, well-cared-for children will miss less school due to illness. And they will likely earn better grades in school and have less behavior problems. When children receive the education they deserve, they soar. They can go on to change the trajectory of their own lives. The world, the future, is theirs to claim. The Bremerton Backpack Brigade exists to feed hungry kids. That's all we do. And the brigade only works because of people like you who support our work. We are grateful for your continued support and your help to change the lives of children, one backpack of food at a time. Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to stick around if you have any questions. If you want to volunteer. Thank you.
And I think if it's all right, I'm going to ask Myra to join me afterward, and we can certainly greet all of you and bring those questions if they aren't popping up now. But thank you again for sharing.
My pleasure.
From your heart and guiding us in this moment.
Thank you. Thanks,
and
Clint.
As Myra, yes, please. As Myra reminded us, the act of sharing food is the call we saw in Peter's final encounter at the end of John's Gospel with the risen Christ. It is the act that Jesus called his disciples to when the multitudes were fed with so little. Extending our table is part of who we are called to be. And so this morning, our hymn for joy is as much a hymn of recollection and of celebration of the fact that the Backpack Brigade is one of the ways that we extend our table to our neighbors in need here in our community. And though we may not physically sit with them face to face in that moment, through our sharing, through our work to bless their ministry, which blesses those kids who need that food, we extend Christ's table. So let's break bread together with them through our outreach and our gifts in body and in spirit. And let's reflect on that as we hear these words to our hymn, Let Us Break Bread Together.